What's up, folks? Welcome to the Slow Climb, and with any luck, the first video of the channel. My name's Leo, and I'm a pilot. First tip of the day for you: if you're ever wondering if someone is a pilot or not, just ask us. We're dying to tell you. I've got my private and instrument ratings, just finishing up my commercial training, maybe CFI after that, and when I'm not flying out there, I'm usually on here playing flight sim, DCS, and I spend so much time on these sims that I figured I might as well make some videos while I'm at it. Maybe you guys can get something out of it. This tutorial series is going to be on the awesome plane you're looking at right now, the Cirrus SR22 in Microsoft Flight Sim 2024. Most of my flight hours are in these SRs, and they're a ton of fun to fly. So here's video number 1, the cold and dark start. All right, let's do it. All right, welcome to the cold and dark startup for the Cirrus SR22T, T for turbocharged. And this is the G6 variant, the 6th generation of this. Okay, hang on one second. Let's get the safety caution out of the way. I am not a certified flight instructor, nor should any of this information be used for flying a real-world aircraft. This is just for fun. Okay, back to me. Awesome plane that they have in Flight Sim 2024. The G7s just came out in real life, and they're even cooler, but we're on the ground here at Plymouth Municipal Airport in Massachusetts. This is Kilo Papa Yankee Mike. I fly out of here quite often in the real world, and they did a good job with it. It looks pretty close. And so we're going to get started with how to turn this plane on. And in real life, the first thing we do is we pop this door open, and you can reach it from the outside. We turn these switches on standing out here, but in the sim, we'll hop inside real quick, and we're going to turn the battery switches on. Flaps are going to come down to 100%. And then we're going to turn all the lights on. So nav light coming on, strobe, landing light, and the ice light. Illuminate. The ice light shines the leading edge of the wings with a little bit of light, so that in the dark and in low visibility conditions, we can see if ice is accumulating on there. So with all the lights popped on now, we'll hop back outside and take the opportunity to check that the lights are working while we take all the covers off. All right, pitot coming off, pitot cover coming off. We got the landing lights, taxi lights, nav lights are working correctly on this side. Normally you'd see the anti-collision lights working back here as well too. I think that's just a rendering issue in the daytime. For the flight sim, we'll take the tie downs off. Wheel chocks can come off. Engine covers coming off. There's the landing light, taxi light looking good. Come over here. Landing light, taxi light, nav light all working correctly over here. And at this point, we'd normally hop back in the plane now that we took the covers off, and turn the battery and light switches off. We don't need the ice and the landing light on anymore. Normally we leave nav and strobe on because we're going to want those on as soon as we go to start the engine, so those can stay, but then we'd normally pop the batteries off for now so we're not draining the battery for too long while we do a whole pre-flight outside. Now, I'm not going to bore you guys with the crazy step-by-step checklist pre-flight on the outside of the plane. Frankly, I think it's a little silly in the flight sim anyways, because it always essentially gives you a brand new aircraft when you load in, unless you programmed failures or damage on purpose, I guess. But in the real world, we'd be going through all the checklist items on the outside, checking the flaps, the ailerons, the structure of the aircraft, the rudder, and making sure that everything looks correct, nothing's damaged. All the antennas are in the right place, so forth and so on. Some of the most important things we're doing is making sure that the fuel levels we're visually inspecting inside the wing tanks are at the right level. It's the right color fuel, that light blue for the 100 low lead. And if we're expecting full fuel on both tanks on each wing, we're actually seeing that when we look in there. So we'd check both tanks as part of our pre-flight, and we'd also sump the fuel underneath the wings and all that to make sure that there's no debris or water separating in the fuel. But Flight Sim doesn't let you do any of that. And again, not that anything would ever really be wrong in the Flight Sim. And we check the oil in here. We got the dipstick is accessible in the engine compartment through this little door. Make sure that we got the right amount of oil in there. All right, so we'll pretend all of that is good to go, and we'll hop back in the airplane and start this thing up. So, batteries are going to come back on now. We'll wait for these screens to initialize. All right, and normally we'd keep the door open while we're sitting in here now so we can yell out the door, our little safety clear prop and all that. I don't know how to keep the door open without it popping me back outside. Maybe there's a way to do that. I'm sure you guys will let me know. But we got the batteries on, nav and strobe are on, and that kind of indicates to people around the plane that the engines are probably going to start soon for safety. And then now we're going to pretend this plane hasn't moved in a while, so we got to prime the engine before we get it started. So we're going to take a look over here. This is the EIS, the engine information section. Normally this lives over on the right screen in the MFD, but because we haven't moved past the splash screen on this screen yet, it's temporarily placed it over here, and that's fine. So we're paying attention specifically while we prime it to this fuel flow gauge, and we're going to watch that creep up as we prime the engine before we get it started. And we do that by the mixture lever, this red one to the right of the throttle. That's going to go all the way to rich, and then we're going to crank the throttle all the way to max as well. And with both of those up there, the fuel pump switch right here, that's going to move down into the prime position for about 2 Mississippis as we watch the fuel flow go up, and then we're going to push it up into the boost position. So here we go, prime, 1, 2, and then up into the boost position, and it can live there now. So we'll bring this throttle lever down to idle. The mixture can stay full rich, and then we'll just crack this throttle about 1/4 inch, right around there. Yell clear prop out the door, close the door, grab the key, hold it in the start position, engine turns over, let the starter go, and it naturally returns back into the both position. Successful engine start there. Take a look at our instrumentation over here as well for our EIS panel. Oil pressure is in the green. Our cylinder head temperatures are slowly starting to rise. Oil temperature is also slowly starting to rise. It's not in the green area yet because the engine just started, but it's slowly going to creep back up. You've got RPMs right up here underneath our total percent power, and we'll creep that down to around 1,000 RPM as we sit here on the ground. And now that everything's in the green and we're started, we'll get our alternator 1 and 2 going, and then our avionics switch can come on as well. Okay, now that the engine is started, the next thing we want to do is lean the mixture out. So a lot of pilots, even in real life, forget to do this. And we put the mixture all the way to rich to get the engine going. But now that it's started, especially at these low idle RPMs here on the ground, and even as you get to airports that are at higher and higher elevations where the air is even thinner and thinner on the ground, it wants even less fuel because the fuel compared to the amount of particles of air that it's mixing together to put into the cylinders of the engine, it's too rich. It's got too much fuel. And if you leave it there, especially on the ground while it's running for long periods of time, the engine will still keep going, but it'll start running rough because really there starts to accumulate fuel inside the cylinders that it's not fully burning because there's too much of it. So we'll lean this out, and the way we do that is we're going to pull this mixture lever back slowly like this as we're watching the RPMs. They're going to slowly rise over here as we pull this back, and you can hear the engine revving up a little bit. And then eventually, if we pull it too far, the RPMs start to go back down. So we've gone too far now. We just inch it back up into that spot where the engine was happiest, right around there. And that's where we leave it. So that's lean now, and then we'll just pull the throttle back to about 1,000 RPM again while we continue setting everything else up on the plane. Okay, so mixture is leaned. We're good to go there. Let's reach up here now that the engine has started, and we're going to take this cover off. And this is Cirrus Aircraft's claim to fame. If you know anything about Cirrus, you'll know about this. This is their CAP system, or the Cirrus Airframe Parachute System. And it's an entire parachute for the whole aircraft. If there's an in-flight emergency, like an engine failure, or a mid-air collision, or complete loss of control, or anything like that, where you don't have enough altitude to safely pick an emergency airport for landing and reach the runway comfortably with your glide without having engine power, then your next best option is this cap system. And you pull this big red lever in like a chin-up position. The red portion of this would come out of the casing. There's a little string that's attached to the back of it that goes all the way through the fuselage to the back and starts the ignition process for a rocket-propelled package that comes out of the tail of the aircraft back here. And you can barely see it because it's painted over, but there's a little square door compartment right here where that whole rocket-propelled package containing the parachute would break out of the tail of the plane and deploy behind the aircraft initially and then transition above it to allow the aircraft to slowly descend to the ground at a safe speed and hit the ground wheels first. And it's a super cool system. So normally, not only is that cover that we took off there, but there's also in this little, there's a little hole here if you can see it on the recording, and normally there's a safety pin that's through that. When the aircraft is off and sitting on the ground, as soon as we get the engine started, we pull that pin out so that this is now fully accessible if it's needed. All right, so we got that good to go. Now let's initialize our screens. We got everything on. Our primary flight display is already up. The MFD, or the multifunction display on the right, is still sitting here on the splash screen, so we can either, just like it says on the screen, we can either hit the rightmost soft key or we can hit the enter key down here. A lot of the things on these screens can be controlled either with the soft keys below them for the G1000 system, or in this plane, because of the Perspective Plus avionics package it has installed, we can do a lot of controlling of both of these screens with the Garmin control unit panel right here in the center, which is a lot easier to reach in real life too, because normally your right hand's sitting right here near the throttle, and this is a lot easier to reach. So we can just hit enter right here. That'll move us past the splash screen. In the real aircraft, before it takes you to the map, this is going to cycle first through this passenger safety briefing screens, and then usually it takes you to the fuel and weight and balance screens before it brings you to the map. So we're going to go to those screens now first. We'll use this outer FMS knob to cycle over to the auxiliary section, and that brings us to the weight and balance screen. So let's do the fuel first. We can access that right here. It says fuel. Click that. And this is our fuel totalizer. And you can see there we're Cirrus SR22 Turbo. And now you may be wondering, well, doesn't it already know how much fuel it has? Why do we have to program that in again? And the reality is that this is the fuel totalizer, the computer system of the plane, and this fuel gauge that we get right here. These two things don't really talk to each other. This fuel gauge is really only reliable when the wings are level and you're sitting with no external forces exerted on the aircraft in any sort of direction or vector, when the fuel level in the tanks is sort of stable, because this is only displaying information for the left and right tank based on the sort of like analog or more rudimentary like bobber floaters that are inside the wing tanks. So we know we have full fuel, but then at the beginning when we start the plane up, whatever total amount of fuel we know is loaded into the plane, we want to tell the computer system of the plane over here how much fuel there is. So if for some reason, this is already correct, but if for some reason this was all the way down here, say, you know, it thought it had only 42 gallons of usable fuel, and these two things didn't agree, we'd want to make sure we correct that and we tell it, okay, no, we have full fuel, because that agrees with what's over here, and what you would know in real life too, because you're the one that refuels the plane, or the last person that used it would, you know, it would be in some sort of log like, hey, we filled it up, or we filled it up only this much amount, or whatever it is. So we tell the plane initially in the totalizer how much fuel is on board, and then from now on, even if this starts not being accurate as we fly, the computer system can calculate our total fuel based on the fuel flow and the fuel that's being burned and used as we fly through the air in different conditions. So we told it how much fuel we have here. That's correct now. We can hit enter. It's got the right amount of fuel on board. And then now we're going to put our weight in. So we'll right click the FMS knob. It's like pushing it in the real aircraft to bring up our cursor. Taxi fuel, yeah, normally I put like 2 pounds or so is a conservative number. That's probably too much, but better to be safe than sorry. and then outer knob to move that cursor around the screen to the different fields. Go over to the aircraft load section. So pilot weight, I'm over here in the pilot seat. Enter. Nobody in the co-pilot seat, so 0 pounds there. TKS fluid, that's the anti-ice fluid into the wings. There's none in the aircraft right now, but if there was some in there, you'd want to calculate how much weight and fluid of that you have. But we'll leave that at 0 for now. There's nobody in the middle rear seat, nobody in the left, nobody in the right. 0, 0, 0, and then baggage. They usually put like 30 or 40 pounds back here to account for the wheel chocks and the tie downs, bags, maybe like the emergency raft that's back there usually, and that kind of thing. All right, so we put our weights in, and then we'll check our CG envelope over here and make sure that we're within limits. And we are, right? So we've got total weight on the y-axis. If this was, the dot was up here, we'd have too much total weight. And then on the x-axis is our actual center of gravity, or essentially where the weight is distributed in the plane. So if the dot was either to the right or to the left outside this envelope, then we may have, we may be below the total weight, but where the weight is not within parameters for the aircraft. So we may need to move passengers around, or move luggage around, or take some fuel out of the plane, and so forth and so on. But we're within the CG envelope, so we're good there. We can hit confirm down here, and don't make the mistake that I often make, where I load all this in here and then I just hit the home screen or something, and I don't hit confirm, and it doesn't save anything I just did, and then I gotta go back. So confirm, and that brings us to the map screen. And we'll zoom in here to your liking, but normally for taxi we'll zoom in so we can see the taxi diagram of the airport. And that is the plane fully started up. So that is the cold and dark startup procedure for the SR22. And unless you like going through the trouble of starting planes only to then not actually fly anywhere, stay tuned for the next video where we'll go over taxi, takeoff, and climb procedures. Thanks for watching.